is going to be, and the next lesson, is all going to be researching ready for our end task. So on your success criteria, you know what your end task is going to be. It's going to be persuasive writing about join the war effort, play your part. But we need to know what that meant, don't we? To persuade some people to do it, we need to know what it actually was. All right? Some of this you'll be doing in your afternoon topic sessions. You'll be learning some of this, but some of it you need to know before that, okay? So, there are lots of links posted on Seesaw, and we're going to be researching for us today and tomorrow, or the next day, lots of websites. And those websites are going to be absolutely chock full of information, aren't they? Yeah? And sometimes, have you ever heard the phrase, you can't see the wood for the trees? Basically, there's so much information you can't find what you need. So what we're going to do now is think about what we've read, what's the key information that we need from that based on what our end task is going to be. Because remember, we're persuading people to do our war effort. Think what's on your success criteria, especially things like the statistics and the facts and that kind of thing. They're what you're going to get from your research, okay? The other stuff is what is like the rhetorical questions, exaggerated language, the modal verbs, all those kind of things, and what you are going to put into it to make it sound persuasive. This is for the research element, which is going to be the facts and the statistics and what actually happened, okay? So the basic information, because then you are going to put it into a persuasive text. That's your job. So what we want to avoid next week when we actually do our end piece of writing is having to think about what to write. We are going to find what we need to write, then it's just about putting it into the right words and the right language for our genre. So what our piece is going to be, persuasive. Yeah, does that make sense? But like when we did the balance argument, we had to research both sides of the argument, didn't we? This time we just need the information because then we're going to make it persuasive. So I've just found some information. This is like, so we're on a website, and we've just found this piece of information on a website. We need to think about what we need to know from here, because you could sit and copy all that out, okay? You could sit at home on your computer and snip it and put it in a document. But actually, are you going to just write this into your end piece? Is it going to be persuasive writing? No, it's information, it's facts, it's statistics. We've got to pick out what we want. Okay, imagine you've got your favourite packet of sweets in front of you. Okay, and there's loads of different sweets in amongst them. You're going to pick out the bits you want. Yeah? It's like when you eat your Skittles and you only like the orange and yellow ones, you don't want the purple and red ones. You're going to pick out the bits you need, alright? And then you might, in terms of research, we're going to summarise, okay? So maybe our note is going to be a summary of that information, because we don't necessarily need every single word that's in here. Does that make sense? Because sometimes what is really hard when you do notes is you just copy everything out, and you don't need everything. You just need something to remind you. And this is a really good skill. When you get to secondary school, when you get to do a degree or a job, sometimes you'll read lots of information. You just need the key points. Does that make sense? Like when I look at our planning. I'm not going to read you every single word that's on my planning. I pick out the bits that I need for me to do my job and to teach you what you need to do. Okay, so let's have a look. Newspapers offered useful making do tips for things like dyeing clothes, rehealing shoes, and making tasty meals from off-ration food, such as offal. Women painted their legs to look like stockings. Some dogs and cats were even combed for wool. Okay, that's a random bit of information, isn't it? The government encouraged and regulated at every stage. It offered make-do suggestions for Mrs. So-and-so. Squanderbug posters encouraged people not to waste anything, but when women began making clothes out of curtains, the practice was banned. Curtains were needed to black out houses at night so that the enemy bombers could not see the lights. Okay, lots of bits of information. Okay, anything you think, oh, I'm going to need that?
I found a colon in there.
You did find a colon in there.
Mm-hmm.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and hyphen, those words should actually be close together. Making do. Hyphen to avoid ambiguity. What information can we get? There's lots of words on there. Yeah.
I want to do with the curtains so they couldn't see like where the house was.
Right, so what do you think in terms of the war effort? What information do we need to pick out of this in terms of what people were doing to support the war? So what were they doing? So one thing they needed to do was what to their houses? They needed to black out their houses so the enemy bombers could not see the lights. Do you think in your notes you need to write, curtains were needed to black out houses at night so the enemy bombers could not see the lights? Do you think you need to write all that information down? What do you think you need to pick out that to write down to remind you?
Blackout.
Blackouts. Yeah? Keep curtains for blackouts. Yeah? That's what you can write in your books. I'm going to see, I don't think it's probably going to let me highlight on here. Get some yellow down there. I think it's going to move. Oh no, it's going to let me. Ooh. So we want this bit, blackout. Don't even need houses, do we? Curtains were needed to black out. So that's part of being in the war effort, wasn't it? You are going to be able to remember so that enemy bombers couldn't see the lights. You're not going to need to write that down. I'm going to leave this up, so don't worry about writing it all down right now. Let's just move on to the next thing. What kind of things, if I said to you, make, do, and mend, says Mrs. So-and-so, what things would be related to make, do, and mend on there? Don't worry about writing it down now. We're going to keep the bits, we're going to highlight bits, and you can write them down at the end, okay? Rather than having to wait and highlight it now. What about make, do, and mend? What do you think make, do, and mend was all about? What does it sound like it was about?
Wasn't it about when they made the beds in the...
No, I can see where you get it from, but not from that. This is more to do with, look at the top, making do tips like dyeing clothes, rehealing shoes, and making tasty meals off ration foods such as offal. Women painted their legs with stocking. Not relevant at this point. Rehealing shoes. Now, do you know what that means?
Does it mean like when say? No, I completely forgot.
I think you were there. When your sole of your shoe, I know we're wearing trainers at the moment, but normal shoes, those soles sometimes get very thin and run out, wear out. So rehealing them was putting a new heel on the bottom rather than buying a new pair of shoes. So making do with what you've got and mending what you've got rather than going out and buying new. Why do you think that was relevant at this point in the war?
Because most shops were closed, so you couldn't go get it because of the bombs.
Why were the shops closed?
Isn't it because of the war?
But why?
Because they're going to be dropping bombs and the people that work in the shops are going to have to be at home trying to like...
Not necessarily. That's what you'd have thought, wouldn't you? But actually, you think how long this war went on, in many ways they tried to carry on as normal. Shops would still be opened because there was no Amazon in 1939. You couldn't order anything online. There was nothing that you could order, you had everything you needed, you had to go and get. It lasted from 1939 to 1945. So you've got 6 years worth of, you're going to grow a lot in 6 years, aren't you? Yeah? So what do you think this make, do and mend thing was all about? Why did they need to make do with what they've got and mend what they've got? This word, ration, might give you a clue.
Is it because they had to save the things, like to do things with the soldiers?
Big voice.
Is it because they had to use it to do with the soldiers?
Partly. So things were rationed, weren't they? We've talked a little bit about rationing. So you couldn't just go out and get whatever you wanted, okay? So, like you're saying, they needed to make sure that our soldiers had the clothes and the things like that. So, but also, we could, once the war started, nowadays, you think where your clothes actually come from. You look in the label of your clothes, where your clothes actually come from. We don't have cotton farms in the UK, do we? So if you think you want something made of cotton, where is that going to come from? Another country. When there's not everything's being bombed, and at the time, probably lots of things came over in ships, we weren't able to get, it's called imports, okay? You think about, we can't grow oranges in this country, or bananas, or pineapples. I mean, I don't think they'd ever even probably heard of a mango, probably not even a banana and a pineapple in 1939. But they come from a different country. We haven't got the right climate. So lots of things were cut off, and the same for textiles. They were rationed. They couldn't get lots of things in, so you had to make do with what you've got and mend it. So if you've got a hole in your socks, you don't just throw the socks away. Mum or you would learn to sew your socks up. The same with your shoes. If your shoes, the soles were going but they still fit, you'd resole them. And then also, they'd be then passed on to your little brother or little sister to wear. Okay? Your clothes, you would have your elder siblings' clothes to wear, and they would get passed on. So you needed to look after them, so you'd be mending them and making do, okay? Rather than going out and buying lots of new things. Dyeing your clothes, maybe if they've got a bit, I don't know, worn or looked a bit grubby, you could dye them. So, what do we think we need? What information do we need from this top bit? What kind of things do they do with make, do and mend?
Reheal shoes, dye clothes.
Yeah, so rehealing shoes and dyeing clothes. Some examples of make, do and mend would be rehealing shoes, and dyeing clothes. Oh, we knew it was going to happen eventually, didn't we? Dyeing clothes. They would probably go together, wouldn't they? Women painted their legs to look like stockings. Tights is what they mean. At the time, it was more appropriate for ladies to have their legs covered with something tight, or trousers, something normally tight. But they were too expensive, or you couldn't get them, so they painted their legs to make it look nice. Sometimes with things like gravy and things like that. Sometimes they used to have a thing where they actually had they had a seam on tights, and they'd draw it up the back of their legs. Because they still wanted to look nice, even though they couldn't buy new clothes and have new things. Yeah? You're going to research this, so do you think we need to research a bit more about make, do and mend? Definitely. So this is make do here. Squanderbug posters encourage people not to waste anything. Do you think we need to research a bit more about squanderbug? Yeah, let's have that highlighted there then. What does squanderbug mean? So not to waste anything. That might very well be linked with our make, do and mend, mightn't it? So that might be able to go in together. Anything else on there? I would quite like to know why cats and dogs were combed for wool.
Really?
That's something I might research a little bit further.
Does everyone have sheep in the country?
There would be sheep possibly. There would still be sheep probably in the countryside, but it might be a case of there wouldn't be perhaps as many, or that because we weren't getting imports of things. Actually, what they needed was we needed to make more in our country, and there wouldn't be enough. I don't think we don't have huge sheep farms like some countries do. We don't have that much land. Think what our land was being used for. Also, what you're going to research is Dig for Victory. Make, do and mend we're going to research, aren't we? Squanderbug. Anything else from there? Rationing. Shall we look at rationing? So basically, the government wanted, and next week when we look at propaganda, you're going to see lots of these when we do the propaganda lesson next week. The government were encouraging everybody to play their own part, okay? Just because you were too young to go out to war, or you were a lady and you couldn't go out to war, they wanted everyone in the country had to support our men fighting for our country by doing things at home.
In the story we're reading, doesn't it say that there's a lady in like an army suit?
Yeah, so she was the billeting officer from Leicester Lighthouse. Yeah, so she was part of the army, but women didn't go out and fight. They did sometimes like the Home Guard, or they did when we research, you'll find there were specific roles for women at war. They actually went and worked in lots of the factories and places because the men who used to work in the factories went to war, so then they need someone. So they still need people to make machinery, make the ammunition, make the parts for the aeroplanes. We still needed that to keep going, didn't we? And if all the men had gone out to war, because up to that point, women didn't work. Women stayed at home. Once you were old enough to be married and have children, you didn't, like loads of your parents do, go out to work. The women stayed at home and looked after the children. But that all had to change. This for us, this is such a massive impact on British life, on our life. Because up till that point, women didn't work. Women stayed at home, normally, especially married women. But, like you say, the men had all gone off to war. We needed someone to keep the country running, and that's what was left for the women to do, and the children picking up other jobs. Okay? So, the web links are all on the website, and that's all we need to do. Off you go.